Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending upon wherever you are joining us. We would like to welcome you to the Post-Crisis Hospitality Management Certificate Program put together by the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management in the Muma College of Business at the University of South Florida. My name is Dr. Cihan Çobanoğlu. I am the McKibben and Dodd Chair Professor, also the Director of M3 Center at the University of South Florida. As you know that we have already broadcast our first lecture last week, Dr. Adam Karmer. He had a very interesting and good session. And this week we are going to continue our lecture series, week 2. We are going to have 2 of our faculty members joining us today. But before I start that, I would like to go over very quick housekeeping items with you. Again, thank you to all of you who are joining this particular program. We have more than 5,500 people from 100 plus countries joining us. If you are looking at us from the YouTube, you can communicate with us from the comment box, as you can see on the screen right now. Also, you can tell us your conversation by tweeting hashtag USF Hospitality from Facebook and YouTube. In addition, this week, we are also streaming this from LinkedIn, our LinkedIn page. We have emailed you the link for it. So if you are also joining us from the LinkedIn, you can communicate with us through there as well too. So we are very excited to bring the week second. Also, for those of you who are not joining us live tonight, due to time differences, because we are serving participants from 100 plus countries. So feel free to watch this at your convenience, this recording, and also please continue to join the discussion with the hashtags USF Hospitality. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Trishna Mistry. Trishna?
Hello, thank you, Dr. Cihan. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of our post-crisis leadership workshop that's organized by the M3 Center at the University of South Florida School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. I hope you all are doing well, staying healthy and safe. And because of the actual crisis that has created the need for this workshop, obviously I cannot be with you all in person, but I am very happy to meet you all virtually. Of course, those of you who are attending this session live, and those of you who are taking advantage of the flexible attendance option that is also being provided. As Dr. Cihan mentioned, I am Trishna Mistry. I will be talking to you all today about arguably one of the most valuable resources that your company has, and that's your employees, your people. So let's get started. I'm going to share my slides with you. And so we are going to talk about a human resources perspective on the hospitality industry post the COVID-19 pandemic. And here is a quick look of today's session. We will talk about the importance of human resources management in the hospitality industry. We will talk about the challenges that the managers are facing regarding HRM. We will discuss some solutions and some recommendations to these challenges, and then we will talk about the role of effective crisis communication, and then we'll close with the new transformed role of human resources management post-crisis. So let's get started. First on the agenda is the importance of human resources in the hospitality industry. Now, as we all know, the hospitality industry is very different from some of the other industries. For example, the manufacturing industry. The foundation of our industry is that we have direct interaction with our guests and customers. Our employees are in constant contact, social distance or not, with our customers. This is not the case in a lot of other industries. So our employees deal with not only physical labor, but also emotional labor, because their interactions and their services that are being provided to the customers matter just as much as the actual product. Another unique characteristic of the hospitality industry is the fact that the product and the service cannot be separated from each other, which means that the inseparability characteristic describes that our employees are providing the service and the product at the same time. So for example, in a restaurant, the act of serving the food and the actual food, the actual meal, go hand in hand. Again, this creates more labor for our employees. It's not just physical, but emotional labor. The third unique characteristic is that of intangibility. A lot of the services that we do offer have to do with how we make the customers feel rather than just selling them a product like a car that they can touch, feel, and judge. So instead, our customers are judging our employees. So let me say this again, added emotional labor, added pressure, added stress. So the last one that I want to talk to you about deals with the idea that our industry is heterogeneous and that we are offering a wide range of products and services within the same company. Think of a resort. The front desk agent may also be dealing with reservations and concierge, sometimes also a night auditor. So our employees are wearing a lot of different hats. One last time, added stress, added labor. So this is some basic premise of the industry, and most of you know this already, but the reason I'm starting off with these characteristics is to remind you all that our employees are very, very crucial to our businesses and are working very hard for our customers. So it is very important for us to make sure that they are feeling well and that they are doing well. So my colleague from High Point University, Dr. Jessica Whittala, and I got curious to see how the hospitality industry employees are feeling about the current situation. So we conducted a study of 242 hospitality industry employees, and we asked them to tell us about their overall work experience and about their employer's response during the current crisis that we're all facing. It was an open-ended question, so they were free to tell us, exactly how they were feeling. We didn't have multiple choice or anything like that. They were just typing and telling us how they were feeling. So we put all this data together and did some, data analysis magic. And here is what we found. Here are the sentiments. Here is a neat little chart that shows us the results of the sentiment analysis that we performed. And what we found is most employees had mixed feelings about their employers and their overall work experience. You can see that in the blue. That is the largest chunk of the chart. So let me elaborate on this a little bit more. Most of them responded, and this is to give you a little bit of context on what the mixed feelings mean. Most of them responded that they were thankful that they still had a job, because not everyone was that lucky, but they feared getting sick themselves or feeling negatively about the employer's response. So there was still some negative feelings, or lack thereof of the employer's response. Maybe there wasn't a lot of communication on the employer's part. About 33% felt just pure negativity, negative feelings, and that you can see in the red. 12% felt positively, and that's in the yellow, and then about 8% were pretty neutral in terms of their description of their employers and their work environment. So this is a neat little chart to show how the hospitality industry employees are feeling currently. And at this time in this session, I want to start out by doing something similar with all of you. So how about we take a quick poll of all of our live attendees today and ask you all how you are feeling. I'm going to provide you with the same 4 options. So it's mixed feelings, negative feelings, positive feelings, or neutral feelings. And I'm going to ask you to pick one based on your experience. So if you're currently not employed, you may tell me about your previous employer or how you're currently feeling. If you're a student, you could tell me about your educational institution. So let's take a quick poll. You can scan the QR code, or you can type out the link. Okay, so you've all clicked on your response. Let's look at the results. All right, we are looking at very, very similar responses to what we found in our study. A majority of you are having mixed feelings, about 52% are having mixed feelings about the current environment and how your employer or your educational institute is responding to it. About 19.5% have negative feelings about how your employer is dealing with this. Positive is about 18%, which is a little bit higher than the results of the study, and about 10% of you have very neutral feelings about what is going on at your employer or your educational institute. So this is very, very interesting data, and what it brings us to is a discussion of the fact that our employees are the core of our businesses, and they may not necessarily be doing too well because of everything that's going on. So that gives us an additional reason to make sure that we are doing everything we can to support and to overcome the challenges that they're facing currently. And we'll talk more about it as we go on with the session, but I certainly wanted to start with it to kind of establish the need to make sure that we're doing everything we can for our employees. So moving on, I think we have established pretty well now that our employees are important. So let me give you one more reason why human resources management is very, very critical, especially to the hospitality industry. Your employees, are you ready for this? Your employees are also directly affecting your financial performance and your bottom line. And let me explain how. This is a visual that you see on the screen of what we call the service-profit relationship. And in simple terms, it translates to happy employees equals happy customers equals more profit. So since we have a very heavily service-dependent industry that we talked about, we want our employees to be our company's ambassadors to our guests and customers. They are facing them on our behalf. So if our employees are satisfied, it will lead to employee loyalty and very, very good customer service on their behalf. They're going to perform really well. This now will in turn create customer satisfaction and loyalty. Customers are going to be happy, customers are going to be satisfied, and these satisfied customers are going to not only keep coming back, but also bring friends and family, use social media, create good word of mouth for your company. And so this cycle creates more profit for the organization. So you know, as easy as it is to say that we should keep our employees happy, and it's such a great thing, let's also acknowledge that keeping our employees satisfied is definitely easier said than done. Talking about it, doing it, very, very different things. So what we're going to talk about next are some challenges related to human resources management in the hospitality industry. What is it that we're facing? So let's talk about some challenges. The pandemic has brought about a lot of challenges related to HRM. Some of these include continuing the business continuity plans. How do we keep running our business and serving our guests while maintaining safety precautions and sanitation requirements, managing flexible work arrangements? We all know that a lot of personal factors are now affecting the work life, whether the employees have children that they're caring for who are out of school, or a patient that they're caring for at home, sharing the same workspace with their partners or other family members. There's a lot going on. Managing employee communication, being in touch with our employee and updating them on this very fluid situation, providing support, providing training while we're away. So much more. We're going to get to this in just a few minutes. Another challenge is making sure our employees are aware of the changing work policies and added responsibilities if they have any concerns, because if we're potentially furloughing some employees, they may have added responsibilities for our existing employees, things like that. How are we going to handle time off? They're going to have a lot of concerns, so make sure we're addressing them. And of course, the preventative measures, whatever we need to do, temperature checks, regular testing, personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, whatever is appropriate and needed for your business. Last but not the least, welfare policies. Are we geared up to support our employees with resources, wellness counseling, as an example, in these very difficult times? So here is a beauty of problems that we just discussed. They come with solutions. So let's talk about a few solutions or a few recommendations that I want to share with all of you. And before we do that, I want to pause real quick and see if we have any questions that I can take from our live audience and see if there's anything that's coming up right away. And then we'll continue talking about the solutions. Communication is key. People shouldn't get their info from Facebook groups. Agreed and agreed. I actually have a very, very important slide that talks about this same exact thing. And gossip mongering is such a big issue that is coming up right now. And so we're going to talk about that too, and how to manage that and making sure you're communicating the accurate information, and so they're not hearing things from the grapevine. Taking care of your employees is important. I have Paul saying, take care of your employees, they'll take care of your guests. Absolutely, the service-profit relationship, talks really well about this that we just talked about. So let's jump back in and talk about some of the solutions and recommendations for some of the problems that we've just discussed. So the first one, as we just mentioned, communication is key. Communicate consistently with your employees. Check in with them. Have daily, have weekly meetings, whatever fits your schedule. Even if it is a quick call or a quick text, use technology. Take advantage of technology. Make sure they're still feeling like a part of the company. What we do here, our faculty does a quick Friday virtual happy hour, and it's an informal time, for us to unwind and chat with our colleagues who we can't see in person, who we miss. Another example, I'll give you my husband's company. Actually, they do a 15-minute stand-up meeting every morning where they joke, chat, ask questions, and talk about their day, and then they get their day started. This is every single day before they get started. So we all look forward to these things. I know we all do. The second thing I want to talk about is celebrate wins. This gives you a chance to focus on the positive. Recognize the big and small wins. It just takes a quick minute, but a shout out or a hurrah, really goes a long way. It'll help with building employee morale. It will give them added motivation and positivity to continue doing the good work that they're doing, even in these uncertain times. Set clear expectations. This is also very important because there is a lot of uncertainty. The situation is changing constantly. Make sure that they know how to do things. How do I take a sick day if I'm already working from home? How does that work? How do I do this? How do I do that? There's a lot of questions that these employees have. Don't assume that your employees know what they're expected to do. Don't assume how they're supposed to reach out to you. A quick, knock on the door, hey, do you have a second, may now turn into a meeting. They don't know how to do that. So make sure they know what is expected. this is something none of us have faced before. So communicate. It really comes down to that. Be there for them. Again, I talked about this, very basic, but so, so necessary. Support your employees. Share a positive idea, a company resource, a wellness counseling link, an employee wellness webinar, whatever it might be that you think might help them, is really going to go a long way. People are scared and they want to know that you have their backs, and that's really how they're going to have yours. Some more solutions here: educate, train. Things are changing, and I keep saying this, but are more fluid than we have ever experienced. Life and work as we know it have changed forever. So our employees are going to need different skills to navigate the post-crisis industry. Empathy, kindness are going to go a long way, are going to be even more critical when hiring and recruiting. So, conduct virtual roundtables, online training sessions like these, of course help. So train your employees, make them ready for what is to come next. Focus on productivity. This is sort of, a hidden silver lining almost, because, get that new menu design going that you've always wanted. Change the color in your dining room, paint it. Organize the back office that needs some love and care. Several things that may have been put off over time because, we've just been so busy, that can now be made priority. Can obviously get done, but can also be used to keep your employees motivated, to keep them occupied, to keep them productive. So, that's a great strategy to have. Create strategies for people working from home, because a lot of us are, of course, we're out there serving our customers, and safety and sanitation is a requirement, but a lot of us are working from home as well. So this is literally for those of us. And we've heard so many articles, so many videos about the best way to work from home, right? Get up and get dressed and, keep your regular schedule, some have said, or be comfortable and work in your casual clothes. My advice is do whatever works for you, because everyone's situation is different. I get up, enjoy my coffee out on my patio before I start my day, something I didn't have the luxury to do before. But also, I am cognizant to acknowledge that my office now is, less than 20 steps away from my living area, my kitchen, my bedroom, my husband's office. So it is important to draw that line to shut that virtual door to your office, but in whatever way that works best for you, as long as you're making your own strategy. Have a plan. Lastly, and certainly not in the least, be flexible. Be flexible with your employees. People are going to get sick. People are going to need time off. People are going to have to care for their partners, their children. Internet is going to fluctuate. Children are going to run up and interrupt meetings. We've all experienced this, and we need to take care of our people by being understanding, by being empathetic. And that's really the key to making sure that we're taking care of our own people. I think I've preached enough. And I do hope that I've established the importance of crisis communication with what I've said so far. So communication about policies, gossip like we just talked about in the break, especially if it's incorrect. State of the company, how are we doing? Are we keeping our finances? Things like that. Training, all of it. So what I want to do is take a quick look at another study that I did with my colleague and friend, Dr. Whittala. And this is focusing on the importance of effective crisis communication and crisis response on our employees' attitudes and behavior. So this was a survey that we distributed online, and we used the responses of over 500 employees in the hospitality industry. And so we asked them to answer several questions about the perceptions of their employers, a crisis response, and how it affected their own attitudes and behavior. So this was more of a multiple choice type survey. Some more data analysis magic, and here is what we found. So I know it's a lot of lines and circles for those of you who are not into academia. So let's start from the left over here. We basically found that if a company has good crisis response plan, and if it implements it well, employees feel, and we're going to the far right now, employees feel less stress, more psychological well-being, so they feel better, more job satisfaction, and more organizational commitment to the company that they're working for. So now these are all good things. You want your employees to be, less stressed. You want your employees to be more satisfied. Remember again, high contact, inseparability, service profit relationship. We want our employees to be happy. So we also found that, and now this is looking toward the middle of the chart that you're seeing up there. We also found that it was important for the employees to feel supported by their company. So that's perceived organizational support, and for the employees to believe that their company policies were fair, were just. And so that's organizational justice that you see there. And for these outcomes to be achieved. So again, if I haven't driven the point home yet, communication is key. Wait, have I said that yet? It really is, guys. Communication, very, very, very important. Obviously, communicating with our customers is important, and we're going to talk about that in the coming times, but very, very important with employees as well. So as we talk about communication and employees, I have said this before as well, the role of HR is transforming. We are working in a very, very different environment than we did a few months ago. And so here are some key things to look at while we are sort of redesigning our post-pandemic organization. So I'll quickly go over these, and then we can take a few more questions. So transforming the need of human resources management. The first thing we're going to talk about is employee personalization. The different employees have different needs, so a one-size-fits-all approach, needs to be reevaluated. Employees will require an appreciated, personalized benefits versus the standard stuff that companies are offering. A focus on wellness, and we certainly have addressed this with the emotional labor. It is time that we start considering the physical and emotional and mental health and well-being of our employees and taking it seriously. As I said, our employees are putting in a lot of physical labor, a lot of emotional labor, as they're taking care of our customers for our company, right? So they're working on our behalf. We need to start taking care of them. Being flexible with work, and I think this year has taught us more about this than ever before. Remote work will be a permanent feature in a lot more organizations than it has been in the past. Working from home is here to stay, folks. So engaging a remote workforce is crucial now. You're now tasked with conveying the company culture, the organizational culture to your employees who aren't necessarily, physically in the same building as you may be. So that's another thing that the new role of HR is going to have to deal with. Another thing is employee upskilling, and by this I mean making sure employees feel valued, that we're training them, that we're developing them, that we are making sure that they are cross-trained, because it's very, very important for the business. And then we obviously should work on making sure that we're keeping and hiring the good people. So talent acquisition and retention remains as critical as ever as we deal with new skills. And then the last one is technology. We have to marry technology. There is really, really no way around it. So, obviously we can use technology in renewed ways to hire, to make selection decisions. It can help with training, even servicing our customers. And so really, this is the future. And we'll learn more about this in the coming weeks as well. So bottom line, and this is just a one sentence, but this is really the bottom line of my little talk today, is that employees are a valuable resource, and human resources management absolutely needs to be included in the strategic plan for any company. If it hasn't been in the past, it certainly needs to be in the future. So that's really the bottom line here. And we have a few more minutes, so I'll pause here and see if we have any questions from our live attendees. Okay, so we have a question. Would you also share not so positive information with your employees during the crisis to keep clear communication? Yes, absolutely. In my opinion, they want transparency. If the company, for example, is not doing so well, if you lost a major contract, or if your numbers aren't looking as good, the company employees do need to know about it, because it really is their right, and it's going to obviously not make them feel great about the fact that the company is losing money, but it will certainly make them feel very good about the fact that you were comfortable enough and open enough to share that information with you. I wouldn't stop there, though. I would certainly let them know of the different efforts that you're making to make sure that those numbers get better. Perhaps ask them for their solutions. It's amazing how a good collaborative environment can come up with so many new solutions. So maybe it's time to take their advice, see what options they come up with, because a lot of famous ideas have come up with by employees who didn't really have the job to make those calls anyway. So it certainly is very, very important to share both positive, negative, and have that open, clear line of communication with your employees, for sure. And we have a Twitter question. How do you keep your loyal guests when so many employees were laid off and the atmosphere isn't the same? How do you win them back? How do you win back the laid off employees and have them trust the business? I think the key word here is, you're laying off employees and that you're communicating with them. Same with your customers. You're letting them know that times are tough and decisions have to be made, that they do need to be made, but that you're in constant touch with them, that as soon as things are better, you're going to bring them all back. As soon as, we're all itching to travel, we're all itching to use the industry. It is going to bounce back, and several very important people have said that. So making sure that they know that the company isn't going to forget the employees that needed to be, sort of put on a pause, that we are doing everything we can to bring them back, and that, it will be, the same, if not better, the environment and the atmosphere at your company. And then we'll take one more question. Do you believe a more advanced management team should leave room for employees to make small decisions, and does that influence the employee's perception on the worth of their position? Most companies perhaps can't have that structure to have junior level or lower level employees make those decisions, but they absolutely certainly need to be a part of that process. So as long as you're involving them, that you're taking their input and their feedback, and obviously putting into practice the good suggestions that they have, that will make them feel extremely valued, extremely needed, and appreciated in the company culture. So they certainly need to be, and we talked about this last week in the transformational leadership session. It needs to be a collaborative work environment, absolutely. And then we'll talk about one last question before I move forward. So, do you believe that servant leadership should be a part of the leadership mindset? I think you're going to fail if it isn't. Absolutely. And we've talked about the range of leadership styles, and it goes from autocratic to servant leadership. Your employees are doing so much work. They are doing not only physical work, but emotional work, and making your customers feel special. And it's time for you to make your employees feel special, and servant leadership deals with that, where the idea is that I'm working for my employees. If most companies now are trending toward that culture, and I think it is a good trend that we need to follow from moving to a more autocratic to a more transformational and then servant leadership style. So I think it's only a good thing. So these were very good questions. I am very impressed, but we are running out of time a little bit. So moving forward, just a few references. If you do need to do a little bit of extra reading on it, obviously you can come back to me with questions as well. And the next thing coming up is we have Professor Keith Barron. But before I give him the stage, thank you all for a wonderful session, and I wish you all the very best. And then over to my colleague, faculty member at the USF School of Hospitality Management. He's an attorney, and he's going to talk to you about the legal perspective to this pandemic. And so we're going to bring on Professor Keith Barron. Keith?
Thank you very much, Trishna. That was excellent. Absolutely excellent. And I got to tell you, I wish I could stand up on the stage right now. I really do. But we can't. So we have to do it this way. And I'm very happy to welcome the participants and very grateful that you're all here. I like face-to-face interaction. I'm just going to come right out and say that. I would like nothing more than to be in front of all of you, but we can't do that. We can't do that because we are in the middle of a global pandemic, the likes of which we have never seen in our lifetime. And, we heard Dean Moaz last week say that this is a new world and there will be winners and there will be losers. And my goal here is to help everyone out there remain a winner. Record numbers of COVID in the US, record numbers in Europe. We are seeing shutdowns over in Europe. And, businesses are worried. And that's the bottom line. And before we really begin in earnest, I want to take a survey, if you will, of the litigation landscape and understand the scope and breadth of what's out there. First of all, it's going to start with tort law. Tort law is basically personal injury law, right? Tort law is a body of law that recognizes civil remedies for personal injuries that were by other persons who for their wrongful or culpable conduct. And there are three types of tort lawsuits that are currently being filed with respect to COVID-19. We have estates bringing wrongful death lawsuits against employers because of alleged workplace safety violations and failure to keep a safe workplace. We have cruise ship passengers that are suing various cruise lines, Princess, Carnival, Costa, because they claim they contracted coronavirus on the voyage. We have estates suing assisted living facilities and nursing homes. These are basically medical malpractice cases because of a failure to adhere to a certain standard. We have non-tort related lawsuits going on. We have businesses that were shut down in the spring suing their insurance carriers because of the denial of business interruption insurance claims. We have consumers suing airlines, suing theme parks because of cancellations and failure to provide refunds. We have Frontiers being sued. Disney's being sued for breach of contract by many of their season pass holders. We have college students suing universities because when we had to go remote in the spring, tuition had been paid. They want partial tuition refunds. Because you know what they say, their argument is, well, look, we paid for facilities and we paid for services that we didn't get, that we didn't have access to. We have plaintiff employees suing their former employers for wrongful termination and violation of anti-discrimination lawsuits. And finally, we even have stockholders suing public companies alleging a violation of federal securities laws because according to them, they misstated the pandemic's effects on finances in mandatory disclosure documents. Wow. That's a mouthful. Next slide, please. So how great really is this risk? That's what we have to ask ourselves. And I want you to think about this for a minute. Look at these questions all businesses are asking right now. Can we be blamed for someone contracting COVID-19 on our premises? How can we protect ourselves? Are we protected if we show compliance with public health guidance? And finally, immunity. Will there be some state or federal statutory protection in the form of immunity? Or maybe more importantly, should there be? Should there be? I want you to think about this. There are two schools of thought with this. There's the economic recovery, sort of pro-business school of thought that says, you know what? These lawsuits are going to gut our economy. Businesses are going to be drawn out in protracted litigation. It's very, very costly. Many of the actions are going to be basically meritless, and they're here to benefit plaintiffs' attorneys. They're here for attorneys to extract settlements from insurance companies. And they say, look, we need Congress to act. They need to pass legislation, protecting businesses. But others disagree. There's a whole other side to this interesting coin. In reality, they say there's really very little liability exposure. Why? Because there are causation issues. Remember, we're going to talk about this. If you're going to sue somebody and you're going to allege that they caused something, you have to prove it. It's very hard to prove causation in this context. So that's one argument. Another argument is, look, if we provide this shield, if we provide some type of a shield for businesses, they basically are going to be allowed to commit negligent acts with impunity, right? That is without consequences, and they're not going to be able to be held accountable. And it's going to remove any incentive for them to take the steps necessary to prevent the transmission of this virus. It's a public health issue. So it's really interesting. I want you to remember this. I want you to start thinking about this. I want you to start thinking about what your opinion is on this, because we're going to take a poll in a bit. And it's important for you to think, which side of the aisle do you sit in? Next slide, please. So by far, the most common type of tort action you're going to see is negligence, both with respect to COVID and just in general in running a business. And it's important that we at least look at some of the elements of negligence. And first of all, to understand that businesses out there, you guys, you are not insurers of a guest safety. What does that mean? That means that you're only going to be held accountable if you've done something wrong, right? If you were careless. You're not insurers of a guest safety. Yes, you owe a duty to your customers, to your employees, to provide a reasonably safe premises, to invitees, right? We're going to talk about invitees in a minute. And to use reasonable care to seek out and discover dangerous conditions that might exist, and then warn people. If you breach that duty and that breach causes an injury, you're going to be liable. Each element is necessary for a successful negligence lawsuit. Please keep this in mind, because when we get to immunity, the immunity statutes are suggesting that this type of liability will be forgiven. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about invitees, business invitees, customers, and guests. We have to talk about what exactly an invitee is, right? An invitee is somebody who's on your property to further the interest of your business. Obviously, they're going to be customers, they're going to be guests, they would be employees, they would be people making deliveries, vendors, purveyors making deliveries. And when we talk about premises liability suit, we're looking at two possibilities. Either we allowed an unreasonably dangerous condition to exist on the property, didn't get rid of it, or we failed to warn of a condition that we either knew or that we should have known about. And, you know, there's an interesting case out there I found. Obviously, we are in unprecedented, uncharted waters. That word unprecedented has been used a lot, but boy, it really applies here. So we don't know what the precedent is going to be. We don't know what any of these lawsuits have really not been decided. But this lawsuit was about a bacteria, not a virus, but a bacteria. So it's kind of close. And this Tampa Bay Buccaneer football player, actually a kicker, he would have a procedure done just before the season started to, you know, on his big toe. He was a kicker. And he had it done for about 10 seasons in a row. The team knew of this. They knew he would have the procedure done each year regularly. And so he had the procedure done this particular season. And he came back to the to the clubhouse or to the facility for his post-operation rehab. They knew that he'd had the procedure. And you know what? He contracted a terrible staph infection. He contracted MRSA. Now, how many of you know MRSA is very serious stuff? So not only did it end his playing career, but he got very, very sick. Now, the fact of the matter is they did not keep the facilities sterile, and they allowed a coach and a few other players to use the hot tub, to use the locker room when they knew they had bacterial infections themselves. Now, this is a classic example of a failure to maintain the facility in a reasonably safe manner and a failure to warn. That case settled. Obviously, most civil cases settle. But the bottom line is the Buccaneers, the organization, still had to defend. They still had to spend money. They still had to take the time to defend the suit. Next slide, please. I think there we go. Workers' compensation, very, very important. We have a COVID case that we're going to talk about in a minute, but first we need to understand what workers' compensation is. Workers' compensation is a sort of an agreement between the employer and the employee that if the employee is injured on the job, the employee is going to have access to quick, cheap, easy, inexpensive compensation. They're not going to have to prove that the employer was at fault. It's a very safe, easy way for them to be compensated for their injury as long as it occurred on the job. The employer, as long as they have their premiums paid and everything's up when that accident happens, the employer is protected from, and again, each state is different. You must check your local law, but typically the employer is protected from lawsuits in tort, and most specifically negligence. Now, it's another way of saying that this is the exclusive remedy for the injured plaintiff. Now, this was, there's an interesting case that's out there now, Benjamin versus JBS. Benjamin was a meat packing employee who unfortunately succumbed to coronavirus after coming down with it and getting sick and dying in about 3 or 4 days after he had to leave the plant. His son brought a lawsuit alleging that the plant not only was negligent, but also misrepresented the safety of the plant, fraudulently concealed the fact that they were not following CDC and other local health guidance and guidelines. And, you know, if you take a look at the specifics of this, you see that the fact that they were not, that they gave no PPE, no personal protection equipment out to anyone working there, that they refused to enforce social distancing measures or guidelines, that they failed to sanitize the plant, right? These these would all be potential what? Breaches of their duty, because as we just talked about, they owe a duty to, their plant owed a duty to their employees to provide a safe working environment. And when we talk about COVID-19, there are public health guidance and directives that businesses are going to really need to follow. And we're going to get into this more in a minute. Make sure it's very, very important that everybody understands how important this is going to, that is and is going to be. You know, even though this is a negligence action, you may be asking yourself, why was this brought when workers' comp should be the exclusive remedy? And remember, this is against a direct employer. So not only was the plant named in this action, but so was the parent corporation of the plant, number one. And number two, the plant, the defendant, would still have to prove that they were not grossly negligent. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, that they were not reckless, that they were not, their conduct did not rise to a level of willful or wanton conduct. Next slide, please. All right, so how do we reduce the risk? We have to reduce the risk somehow. Well, obviously the first and the best way is to simply not breach your duty of care, right? To be vigilant, active vigilance. But it's a lot easier said than done. But that obviously is very, very important. Complying with all federal, state, and local health guidance and directives, the CDC, OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. There is a possible safe harbor defense, which we're going to talk about, which would be possibly retroactive back to the start of the pandemic, that many states have passed in their immunity statutes. What this basically means is if the business can show that they substantially complied with public health guidance and public health directives, they will be immune from lawsuits in negligence. But they must be able to show strict compliance. Conspicuous postings of signs and notices and warnings could help. In other words, you know, face coverings, hand washing, social distancing, that there's no guarantee that of complete protection while on the premises. If you're dealing with third-party contractors and vendors and you have a contract with them, consider putting in an indemnification or hold harmless clause that will protect you if either they or they claim that they got it and they take it back and a family member perhaps gets sick. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about this business immunity and liability shields. And I want you to take a look at this map, and I want you to see the states in blue. 16 of them have already passed legislation or pursuant to an executive order that says that businesses, not just healthcare providers, because many states have passed either statutes or legislation protecting healthcare workers, healthcare establishments. This is for all businesses, schools, organizations. The 8 states in orange have legislation being proposed. So almost half the country is in the process of doing this. And this is very dynamic. It is very fluid, as Dr. Mistry said. And just the most recent state to enact this immunity legislation was Michigan. And this was just about not even 2 weeks ago. I believe it was October 24th or 25th. So really very, very recent stuff. Yes, there is a federal statute or a federal proposal. Legislation is currently at impasse in Congress. It's called the Safe Work Act. And it's a little bit beyond the scope of this talk to discuss that, but it was proposed on July 27th, and it's still being discussed and considered. by basically the Republicans proposed it, and Democrats right now are questioning it. And there are some issues with it in terms of constitutionality and legislative authority, but that's beyond the scope of this. We're going to talk about the state statutes that exist that pretty much reflect what the federal proposal would do. But remember, if that federal proposal was passed, it would abrogate state law, state tort law. It would abrogate, it would completely undo, or in this case, abrogate centuries of common law precedent. So it's going to be very interesting to watch and see how this plays out and whether or not they are in fact successful and it is deemed constitutional. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we talk about this business immunity and protections, there are similarities and there are differences. So always check your local law. Regardless of what state you're in, you must always check your local law. Very, very important. What are some of the similarities? They protect businesses from lawsuits related to actual or potential COVID-19. We're talking about negligence lawsuits here. Exceptions: gross negligence, willful wanton conduct, recklessness, or intentional misconduct. Let's talk for a minute about what the difference is between regular negligence, ordinary negligence, and gross negligence. Ordinary negligence is a failure to use reasonable care under the circumstances. It would be, somebody runs a stop sign where they should have stopped, they were careless, they ran a stop sign, somebody got injured. There's a spill on the floor of a restaurant and they came and mopped it up, they didn't put up a wet floor sign and somebody spilled. Most people would have put up the wet floor sign, that's careless. That would be ordinary negligence. Your wooden porch is starting to rot and you don't change the wood on the step and somebody gets injured. Again, ordinary care, negligence. Gross negligence would be somebody in a car is speeding into a very crowded, heavy pedestrian area. That is extreme carelessness. It is almost certain that somebody is going to get badly injured in that situation. So please remember that, the difference. The problem is for plaintiffs is that this is a very high bar. Okay, so it's very hard to prove gross negligence or recklessness. Much, much more difficult than ordinary negligence. Workers' compensation claims related to COVID would still be okay, right? So under workers' compensation, they could still be compensated, but there would be no lawsuit because it would represent their exclusive remedy. Next slide, please. There are some differences. Again, check your local law. Always check your local law. It doesn't mean that lawsuits are going to be barred. They're still going to be filed. So it's about money and time. Businesses are still going to have to defend. Some states like Tennessee will require a doctor to actually state in the complaint that the targeted business caused the plaintiff's injury. That would be a tough one to meet. Heightened proof in some cases. In Nevada, clear and convincing evidence. The plaintiff would have to prove that the defendant failed to follow public health guidance in order to proceed to trial. And it would be by clear and convincing evidentiary standard, which is higher than most civil cases, which is by a preponderance of the evidence, which is just more likely than not. Clear and convincing is reasonable certainty. It's in between by a preponderance of the evidence and beyond a reasonable doubt, which is, of course, the criminal standard, which is almost 100%. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are many differences between the states. And look, this immunity is nothing new. The idea of immunity is not a new thing. You probably have all heard of Good Samaritan statutes, right? Statutes that protect people that will come and volunteer a rescuer. Somebody is in peril, someone is hurt. And this is a similar idea. here. So assumption of risk in Georgia, if a business posts the statutory language, the risk language, they're entitled to a rebuttable presumption that the person, the plaintiff, the customer entered the business and assumed the risk by the plaintiff. This is kind of similar to a limited liability statute with respect to hotel property, where if they post it and they comply strictly with the statute, they're going to be protected in terms of property disappearing on a hotel, at a hotel. And then, of course, interaction with public health guidance. This is very important. We have the safe harbor defense. This more and more you're going to see this, basically where if a business can show substantial compliance with CDC, with public health guidance, they're going to have immunity. On the flip side of it, some states allow plaintiffs to come after businesses to show that they failed to substantially comply, and that would, in effect, have their shield fall to the ground. They would lose the protection. Next slide, please. All right, so here we are. We're back to this business immunity debate, and I think we're perfect on the timing. And so we have the pros and cons of this immunity debate, and I want you to remember, which side do you think would you fall on? We have tension between two main objectives, right? We have economic recovery and we have public health. Obviously, employees need to return to work. We have to get the economy back on its feet. But at the same time, we can't do it at the risk of sickness and illness to employees, to customers, to guests, or their families. Next slide, please. So we have this idea of economic recovery versus public health. The economic recovery argument, obviously, employees have to get back to work. Frivolous lawsuits are going to really be a problem for businesses. It's going to be costly. And full immunity is just necessary to make sure that businesses can remain open without having to deal with protracted litigation. Next slide, please. There we go. Public health. That's the other side of the coin. Look, the fear of litigation is unfounded due to causation difficulties. Think about it. You ever had food poisoning? How do you know it was the restaurant where you think it was? Did you eat anything else that day? Could it have been some other food that caused it? Same thing here. If you're going to allege that you got it at, ABC Hotel, well, how do you know you didn't get it from somebody on the bus? How do you know you didn't get it from someone on the subway? How do you know it wasn't a family member, a friend? Causation issues really very, very difficult. Workers' compensation laws will preclude many lawsuits. And again, this whole idea of if we give businesses this free ride, it's going to remove any incentive for them to provide a safe workplace for their employees and for other people. And it might even benefit, it might even give an undue competitive advantage to slackers who might cut corners and save money rather than being really safety compliant. And we certainly wouldn't want safety compliant businesses to be punished. That would be very bad. Next slide, please. So we're going to take a poll. Do you support liability protection for businesses in the form of immunity from COVID-19 related lawsuits? You can scan the QR code, or you can hit the link. Please time to take the poll, and you can vote now. All right, so we'll wait for the results from the poll. I apologize for talking so quickly, but I wanted to get everything in there and see. All right, wow. Okay, so that's a big piece of the pie. That's a real big piece. So yes, 63% support liability protection for businesses in the form of immunity. and no, 36, almost 37%. And then look, it's a hard question because it's a black and white question, right? But probably the more realistic thing is that there's going to be a middle of the road approach that's going to happen. So, and remember, we're talking about U.S. law here, of course. So I know we have people from all over the world, and it's different in other areas of the country. I mean, of the world. So this is, look, we've just really scratched the tip of the iceberg here. I wanted to try to get in everything that I needed to, and I think I did. But obviously, I hope that there are some questions. I'm sure there are, and I'd like to entertain them now. So Jacob has asked, what is the responsibility of properties to empower employees to enforce mask requirements? Can properties be held responsible for negligence for not allowing employees to enforce policies? That's a really great question. And again, look, that harkens back to the whole safe harbor defense. Properties, you know, they're gonna if they want the immunity, right, and if they want to make sure that they haven't breached their duty of care in states that don't have immunity statutes, they're going to have to make sure that things like mask mandates and other types of public health guidance and directives are followed. So I would say that it is possible that you know, if they blatantly, just like in the Benjamin case, if they blatantly or flagrantly, you know, they absolutely would. I would say yes. Next question, Mary. Can you comment on how duty of care impacts / protects organizations from litigation? Absolutely. I mean, look, the duty of care in a negligence case is reasonable conduct under the circumstances, what the reasonably prudent person would do under similar situations. So organizations can protect themselves from litigation by, you know, by having seminars, by learning how to mitigate liability, and satisfying their duty of care. In a negligence lawsuit, the duty of care is probably the most important aspect. Ivan, hi Ivan. Let's see, is it still considered negligence if business policies rely on local public health guidance and directives? So that's a really good question. It would depend, again, whether or not they breach their duty of care. But I would say that the stricter a business complies with local public health guidance and directives, the more likely it is that they will not be considered negligent. Other questions? Okay, Endurai, could a business face criminal liability for COVID-19 related exposure? Okay, you know, that's a really great question. And the answer is it depends. You know, I mentioned about international law. I checked out a few things. In Italy and Spain, it's actually a criminal offense if a business violates their public health directives and fails to provide a safe workplace for their employees. So, you know, certainly depending upon how the law is written and how it is being applied, it could be. And, you know, even here in this country, we have criminally negligent homicide. We have depraved indifference, murder. You would think that something like this could never rise to that level. But let me tell you, Nassau County, New York, had a conviction, and it was upheld by the highest state court in New York for a DWI, second-degree murder, depraved heart murder from a driving while intoxicated case. And it was the first time in Nassau history that a DUI case was actually charged with murder, prosecuted, and successfully prosecuted, and the defendant, it was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Great question from Twitter. Are class action COVID-19 related lawsuits a potential threat? They are absolutely. Going back to the cruise ship discussion, you know, any place where ingress and egress is limited, for instance, a cruise ship or a nursing home, for example, if many people become sick from the same thing in the same place, it's going to make a class action lawsuit much more likely and quite possibly much more effective. So I would love to leave my email if anybody wants to continue this discussion. Again, there's so much more we could talk about in details. I would welcome anybody wants to reach out and discuss this or anything else dealing with hospitality law, especially as it relates to COVID. I would be more than happy to speak with you or to communicate with you. So I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank my colleagues for all of the production efforts behind the scenes, making me look a whole lot better than I really am. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Barron and also Dr. Mistry. I would like to just remind our participants that there will be a quiz also every week that after we broadcast the lectures. So for you to take the link, please go to Schoology website and also click on courses and click on the post-crisis hospitality management certificate program, and then click on the quiz link. Of course, this was last week's quiz, but this week's quiz will be there shortly. We again thank you for your attention, and we look forward to being with you next week. Thank you.